So to get started with cutting out, the first thing you're going to need to do is print out your pattern. I have printed mine in colour. I like to do that because they have a code here for which side of the fabric you should be seeing, and they also have a where to stitch guide which is in red, and then some of the ones where they have where you've been previously stitching, they have it in grey, so it is colour coded and stepwise. So I do like to have mine printed out in colour. I would recommend that you do that if you can. The other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is you're printing at 100%, that there's no scaling on your printer when you're printing this out. Don't print from your phone or your tablet. You want to print from a laptop or a computer. Phones and tablets can for some reason screw with the scaling even if you put it to 100%. So print it out from your computer or from your laptop, and you want to double check your square, which I've done here. So you can see this is meant to be 2 inches and it is 2 inches. You do need this to be precise. When you become more acquainted with bag sewing and you feel more comfortable with bag sewing, you can alter the percentage size of your pattern pieces to make your scale your bag up to be larger or smaller. That will then mean that this is irrelevant. But for this tutorial and for this sew along and for this retreat, we are going to be sewing it as the pattern recommends. So you want to make sure that your test box is 2 inches square. The other thing that I've done is I've actually printed out 2 sets of the pattern pieces themselves, because where it says to cut on a fold, I actually like to put the 2 pieces together so that I have one entire piece so that I don't have to cut anything on the fold. I'm going to be making my bag out of either leather or vinyl, and I don't want to have folded that because the material will retain a memory of the crease that I have put in. So I like to have my pattern pieces full size so that nothing needs to be cut on the fold. So if you print out 2 of your sets of pattern pieces, you cut them out and then you can stick them together, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So one thing that I recommend is that for one set of your pattern pieces you leave yourself a nice long lip, and then for the other set of pattern pieces you cut it out completely. What I'm going to do is work my way through the first set of pattern pieces and leave myself a lip on everything that has a fold line on it, and then I'm going to work my way through the second pattern pieces and I'm going to cut everything out completely, and that way I know that I've got a lip on one and no lip on the other, so they'll be easy to stick together. So I have my set here that has the extra lip on it. Some of the pieces, because of the positioning of them, you will only have a small lip. Some of them you will have a much larger one. I have the pieces here that you're only going to need to cut out the once. So the handle connector, vinyl snap tab, woven snap tabs, and the main panel accent, you only need to cut those out once because they're not on the fold. So I've done that, but I wanted to show you that you don't need to cut those out. And then I have the rest of the pieces with the fold line on it cut out completely so that I can overlap the edges here and stick them together to make one whole pattern piece. So I'm going to get that done now. Okay, so I have my zipper pocket panel there and I have its corresponding piece here. So I'm going to take the one that I've cut out completely and I'm going to overlap it onto the fold line, making sure that everything is nice and straight. And I'm going to tape that down, and I'm going to make sure my tape goes right to the top and to the bottom of my pattern piece. And there I have a full pattern piece that no longer needs to be cut on the fold, and we're going to need to cut 2 of those and then 2 woven interfacing for those, and it tells you how many you need to cut of each piece on the pattern piece itself. So I'm going to repeat this process for the rest of my pattern pieces, and then we can start cutting out some fabric. You should have something that ends up looking like this. So we have our main panel fleece, and I have one entire piece here, so I can just cut the 2 of the entirety rather than 2 on the fold. We've got the bottom panel and so on and so forth for all of the pieces that had the fold line on them. The only pieces that you won't have done this to are the handle connector, the woven snap tab or the vinyl snap tab, and obviously you'll only need to cut one set of these depending on what fabric you're using, and your main panel accent. Okay, so I'm going to start cutting out my pattern pieces. I am using this faux leather or vinyl that I got from Textile Express. In fact, the lovely Susie bought this from Textile Express and she's allowed me to keep the excess. I've made her an NCW out of it. As you can see, there's kind of cut lines up there. I am going to take my pattern pieces and I'm going to lay them down onto the wrong side of the fabric, and I'm going to trace around them, and I'm going to use this white chalk marker that I have here, which does show up. This one I'm going to make sure I need to keep it sharpened because I want to keep as accurate a trace as possible. When I'm cutting that out, I'm going to be cutting on the trace lines that I make, because obviously the trace lines are going to be on the exterior of the pattern piece, and I need it to be the size of the pattern piece. So I'm going to get them all traced out, and I'm going to pattern Tetris them as best I can. Once they're all traced out, I can then start cutting them out. And there is a list. There's obviously all the pattern pieces that you need to trace out, but there's also a list of pattern pieces for the handles and connectors and things like that, so we're going to trace those or get those marked onto this vinyl as well. As you can see here, I have traced around all of my pattern pieces, and I have then drawn the straight pattern pieces that the pattern actually asks you for. So there's a handle, closure strap, shoulder strap. We're not making the strap holders because I am using hardware for strap holders for this tutorial, and then strap connectors, and the zipper tabs is going to be out of the lining fabric, and I've not come to that yet. I'm also doing a wrist strap just because there was that piece of fabric that's the right size to fit a wrist strap in, so I always try and cut one of those out if I have spare vinyl. You can see that I've done dashed lines down the center of some of these pieces. This is the shoulder strap, this is the closure straps, and they're going to need to fold the raw edges in to meet the center line. So I just find it easier to mark the center line in whilst I'm doing all this, and I do it as a dashed line so that I don't accidentally cut it. So I'm now going to cut all these pieces out, and as I say, I'm going to cut on the chalk line because I have traced around my pattern pieces. If you're working with fabric, you will obviously be able to pin your pattern pieces to your fabric, so you again will be just cutting around all of those. Obviously you can't pin with vinyl, so I have traced all of my pattern pieces. So I'm going to get these cut out, and one thing I'm going to say now is get yourself some scrap paper, get yourself some wonder clips if you're using vinyl, or if you're using fabric, get yourself some pins. When you've cut your pattern piece out, make a note of what that pattern piece is and clip it or pin it to those pattern pieces so that you don't get confused later, because as you can see we've got some very similar looking pieces here. So that is my advice for whenever you make bags, is always label each of the bag pieces. You will thank me later, ask me how I know. If you are taking a course from me in person, you will not have your foam or your interfacing yet, don't worry about that. If you're following along with the online sew along, you need to have all of these pieces cut out. So the first thing I have here is 2 of the fleece main panel. So main panel fleece, cut 2 fleece interfacing, done that. Next we have side panel fleece, 2 fleece interfacing, cut those. Next we have flap panel fleece, cut 1 fleece interfacing, done that. Next we have bottom panel fleece, cut 1 fleece interfacing, one of those. Now we're moving on to our lining. So zipper pocket panel, cut 2 lining and 2 woven interfacing. So I have 2 lining and 2 of the Pellon SF101. We have zipper tabs, and this is the other lining fabric that I'm using, and I have 2 of these, and they are 1 inch by 2 inches, and the measurement for this is in the pattern. Next we have the lining panels, and we've got 4 lining and 4 woven interfacing. So I have 1, 2 interfacing, 1, 2, 3, 4 lining fabric, and then another 2 interfacing, so 4 of each. These are the scraps of vinyl that I have left over, and I'm going to use these to play around with my top stitching length to work out what I like and what looks best, and make a note of that, and then use that top stitching length for the rest of the bag as we make it. I have woven snap tab connectors here, and I've cut 4 of my contrasting fabric. Now technically I should have used the vinyl one, but for the vinyl one they want you to leave the edges raw, so I'm going to attempt and see if I can make it work with these, and if I can't, then I can cut them down and use the vinyl ones. So you want 4 of those. If you're using fabric, you're going to need 4 interfacing as well. So the rest of these are all vinyl for me, and I am not cutting any interfacing out for these. If you're using fabric, you will be cutting out interfacing of all of these pieces as well. Next we have our closure straps. These are 2 inches by 23 inches, and I've cut 2 of those. I have also marked down the center point of these because we will be needing to fold the raw edges in to meet the center point. Next I have my side panel. Now I'm making my entire bag out of the same fabric, so this is my contrasting and my exterior fabric. I will point out when you should have exterior fabric when we come to those pieces. Side panel, cut 2 contrasting. So I have 2 of those, and again no interfacing because I'm using vinyl. Next we have the shoulder strap. The pattern calls for you to cut it 24 inches by 4 inches, and again I've marked the center point. I've actually added another 6 inches onto mine, so mine is 30 inches long because I do like a long shoulder strap. I'm going to attempt it at this length and see how that comes out, and obviously I will report back and let you know what I think. Next we have the bottom panel, one contrasting and one of the woven interfacing, and again I'm using vinyl, so I have just cut that. We have the main panel accent, cut 2 contrasting, 2 interfacing. Again I have just cut the 2 contrasting, and again I have marked on the center point because we'll be folding the raw edges in to meet that center point. I also cut myself a wrist strap which is 12 inches by 3 inches, and that I have a tutorial on how to make these wrist straps. I had a decent sized piece of vinyl that would fit one of those in, and I like a matching wrist strap for my keys for whichever bag I'm using. Next we have the handle connector, so I've got 2 contrasting and they're 2.5 inches by 2 inches, and again no interfacing for me because I am using vinyl. We've got the strap connectors, and we've got 2 which are 1.5 inches wide and 3 inches long. I think I messed up and I drew 2 of them out, so I've got the 2 that are 3 inches long by 1.5 inches wide, and then I've got one that's 6 inches long by 1.5 inches wide, and I've kept it just in case I mess up on these ones, so I won't need to cut that piece again. And again I've marked the center on so that we can fold it in easily later. Next we've got the handle, which is one of those, and it's 16 inches by 2 inches, and again I've marked the center. We've got the flat panel. I've cut 1 exterior fabric, and I'm actually going to use my vinyl as my lining for this as well. I'm hoping that's going to work. If not, I shall come back and cut a lining panel out. If you're using vinyl and an exterior fabric, we are coming to the parts where this would be your exterior fabric. So again I'm using vinyl for the entirety of my bag. If you're using a exterior fabric, you should have 1 of these flat panels in exterior fabric, 1 in lining, and then 2 woven interfacing. And finally we've got the main panel. So again, if you're using an exterior fabric and a contrasting fabric, this will be cut 2 of your exterior and 2 of the woven interfacing, and again I'm using vinyl, so I am just got the 2 pieces. So that is all the pattern pieces that you should have cut out and ready so that we can move on to construction.